Am I on? I'm on. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Corneli. I am a product manager at Tableau. I've been at Tableau about 3 years now. It was my 3-year anniversary in October. So in Tableau years, I'm a bit of a veteran, but working on it. How many of you have heard of Tableau before? Show of hands. All right. How many of you have something running on AWS right now? All right, make sure you check it. Great, so you're in the right spot. I think you're going to like what we talk about today. Today I'm going to talk about managing AWS spend with Tableau. So about a year ago, a customer asked me, can I do this? Can I manage my AWS spend with Tableau? Now, I get asked a lot of questions in my day-to-day. I like being able to say yes to people. And I couldn't say yes to this particular customer. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know if we could do this out of the box. And I said, no, we can't. I didn't like that, so I wanted to change that. I wanted to say yes to that. So I decided to tackle that problem. I took a step back, and I wanted to look at it from a pretty holistic perspective. So what do we care about when we're deploying on the cloud? And these are kind of the 3 main concerns. I started talking to more customers and more people at our organization, and these were the themes that I kept hearing. I want to manage my cost, I want to manage my usage, and I want to manage my security. So we're going to look at the first 2 today. And to kick us off with a little bit more formality, let's quote RightScale here. We know that optimizing cloud costs is the top initiative, again in 2018, across all cloud users. And I would place a strong bet that it will be consistent in 2019 as well. Now, why is this? Why is this such a top priority for people? Well, first thing, so we know a couple things here. This is from the same report. Managing costs is a top priority for organizations at every stage of cloud maturity. So you might think, okay, maybe this is just for giant enterprises. Maybe this is only for the person running their startup out of their garage. But this is true for everyone in every industry. However far advanced you are on your cloud journey, whether you've been on the cloud for years or whether you're just migrating now, this is going to be a top priority for you. So we know there's a wide audience for this. We also know that enterprise IT is playing a strong cloud governance role, including managing costs. So on top of all of their other roles and responsibilities, managing infrastructure, security, they're also wearing the hat of the cost police now, understanding what they're spending money on in the cloud. And finally, we also know that only a minority of companies have actually implemented automated policies to optimize cloud costs. So clearly, there's something needs to get fixed here. How do we best enable organizations to monitor and manage their cloud deployments at scale? So this is the challenge that I set myself, and it just so happens there's a pretty easy solution to it. So how did we do that? How did I set this up? So there are 4 steps to the solution that I've created. The first is to collect your AWS cost and usage data. Has anyone heard of the cost and usage reports in AWS? All right. Well, now you can all, those of you who didn't raise your hand, you've now learned something. So that's successful. So AWS has cost and usage reporting built in. You can go and in the UI, you can set up these cost reports. It's a zipped CSV file. You can set the granularity of it. And it has tons of information about all of your resources that you're using, who's using them, how much they cost, giant files. These get compressed and dropped into an S3 bucket of your choice. Every day, you can set the frequency of how often these get uploaded. So that's a really good place to start. We've got the data. Now we just need to figure out a way to make that data clean and manageable and useful so we can start looking at it. So the next step is to clean and process and then store this data automatically. So I don't want to have to do anything manually. I want everything automated. I want those cost and usage reports cleaned up, put in a format that I can interpret with Tableau and stored somewhere. And I want that all to happen without me having to worry about it. So I look to AWS Lambda functions to do this. So I have an AWS Lambda function that I wrote. Pretty straightforward. I'll show you in a little bit. That every time something gets dropped into that bucket, it cleans it up and pushes it out to another bucket that I can then, step 3 here, query with Amazon Athena. So with Athena, it's a serverless process where I can create a semantic layer on top of that data. And the great thing about this is once I've created that layer, as new data gets added, as long as it fits the same schema, I'll be able to query that additional data. So this fits with the idea of automating this process, not having to make any manual changes. And then finally, I can connect directly to Amazon Athena using Tableau. So we have a native connector to Athena. I log in with Tableau Desktop, and I start building out my visualizations. And then I can push them out to Tableau Server or Tableau Online, and you'll see that in a second. So the trickiest part was actually writing the Lambda function itself. It's about 40 lines of Python code. It probably should be 20 if I did my refactoring correctly. It's pretty straightforward. All it does is it gets triggered based off of an event. So I can say, OK, whenever something gets dropped in this S3 bucket, I want you to run this code. I want you to unpackage the zipped file. I want you to clean up the headers, make sure they're all consistent with naming conventions. I want you to rename it, and I want to push this cleaned up file out to another S3 bucket of my choice. I will point out, so I'm going to make this code available on GitHub. You can use it. I also have a version of this that can push it out to Redshift as well. I chose Amazon Athena because I wanted this to be a lightweight solution, and it just made sense to get in and connect right away, and I didn't have to do any infrastructure maintenance. But you can make the Lambda pretty much push this file out to anywhere you want, whatever is convenient for your organization. And then write my create table statement in Athena and connect from Tableau desktop. So for those of you that don't know, Tableau is a data visualization tool. So you can connect to your data wherever it is, whether it's in a live database or a flat file, data warehouse, what have you. And then you pull it into something that looks like this. So on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side here, you actually can see some of the columns that you get from this data source. So it's huge. And I went through and organized everything into folders just for my own sanity. But just as an example there, you can see all of the information you get just from the line item. So you get IDs, you get time intervals, you get your availability zones, your regions, you get all of the cost associated with it, the pricing, so on and so forth. There's hundreds of columns in this. So there's really a wealth of data to be explored here. And that shouldn't deter anyone. That just means there's lots of exciting insight to be pulled out of that. So we'll jump ahead a step and take a look at some of the stuff that I decided to create on top of this. So this is a prototype dashboard that I built that analyzes your AWS spend over time. It's broken down by sub-account and service. So at first glance, this might seem like a pretty simple one, but I'm pretty proud of this dashboard. I actually changed the color scheme later, so it's a little bit soothing-er. This is very primary, but that's OK. So let's take a look at what we've got here. At the top, you can see the actual numbers. They're not actual numbers. This is all mass data. And my colleague who actually runs this account here is attending, so he will be happy to know that I have put in fake numbers for all of this. So the top is, let's make this really easy to consume. What are the numbers you need right away? You need to know how much you spent last month, how much you spent this month. Are we on track? Are we above? Are we below? What have you? This account is used primarily for training purposes and also customer engagement. So we're funded by credits if we're doing proof of concept deployments. And so you can see that's reflected at the top. Very easy to change that and just show overall cost. And then the first visualization you've got there is the dual axis chart. We're looking at a bar chart with a line superimposed upon it. So we're looking at both cost and usage. And I decided to show both of these because I think it's important to look at them together. Obviously, cost is going to be the most intuitive one. I want to know how much I'm spending. I want to know if there are spikes in that. However, usage actually tells you a lot as well. That's just general activity on AWS. Now, I mentioned that we use this account for training purposes. So sometimes what you'll see is cost remains pretty steady, but you might see a spike in usage. These often happen when AWS announces new services and everyone jumps in and wants to figure out, OK, how do I play with this new database or this new technology? So we might see an increase in usage. And then on the bottom right here, we're breaking this down by service. You can see that the majority of our spend comes from EC2 instances. Pretty intuitive. That's probably going to vary depending on the type of organization that you are running. It might be more heavy in the data warehousing. It might be heavy on the EC2 instances, what have you. And then over on the left-hand side, we've broken this down by sub-account. So we have lots of different users licensed in this account, and we want to know, OK, who's spending what and on the different things. Now, Tableau is great. It gives you lots of interaction. So even though I'm showing you static images, the whole point of creating a dashboard for this is that you can explore it. So let's take a look at some of the things you can do just with this dashboard here. So the first is, obviously, let's investigate spikes. If we see costs go up pretty significantly, we want to figure out what's happening and who's responsible. So we can look at this spike here. You can click on that. And the other two visualizations, so we click at the one at the top, the two at the bottom are going to filter to reflect just the data that you've selected. So we could look at a span of time. We could look at a particular day. We can see that on this particular day, we had some pretty heavy-duty EC2 instance usage here, as well as someone spinning up some RDS instances and consistent S3 usage. That cost is kind of, that one's pretty predictable. It kind of just goes up a little bit every time. And then we can do the same, but we can filter now by service or product. So let's say instead of looking at a specific day or a specific span of time, we want to look at a specific service. So what was actually going on with that RDS instance? These we use for demo purposes a lot, and we've actually got a couple of them floating around. So this was an effort, this investigation here was an effort to kind of pare that down. Do we actually need all of these instances that we have? Where can we be a little bit smarter about our investments? So this is looking at Tableau Desktop, and I also mentioned that I then push this dashboard out to Tableau Server or Tableau Online. So those are our two collaboration platforms. One of them is our SaaS solution, and it looks something like this. So the idea here is now I can share this dashboard with other people on my team or in my organization. Now, once you publish stuff to Tableau Server or Tableau Online, you get a wealth of additional functionality on top of the visualizations that you've created. A key one for this is data-driven alerts. And so when we're looking at cost, what we really want to understand is we don't want to go too high. We have a budget that we need to stick to. We want to know if people are spinning up a lot of instances if we left something running. So what I can do is I can create a alert based off of this visualization. Tableau is going to monitor this, and if my costs go above a certain threshold, I'm going to get an email about that. So that's a really powerful feature, and you can get really specific with the type of alerting you do. So mine's pretty straightforward. It's just overall cost. You could break this down by department, by team, by service. There's a lot of opportunities available there. What I've also done is subscribe people to this view as well. So subscriptions are just going to send you an automated email with a snapshot of this dashboard. So this is a great feature as well. I actually have one. I get this sent to me every week at the beginning of the week, so I can just take a quick glance and see, okay, our cost is looking good. Spend seems to be fine. Someone's doing a lot of stuff with Lambda. Oh, that was me. Got it. And I can subscribe other people as well. So if I want my teammates to be aware of what's happening, I can say, hey, take a look, make sure you're aware of the spend that your team is doing over here. And the other thing that you can do is you can set up user filters on top of this. So when I designed this dashboard, I had like two audiences in mind. I wanted to appeal to the managers of this, or the stewards of this AWS environment, but also just individual users as well, because I wanted to track my own spend. I wanted to know what have I been doing? Am I in target? Did I leave anything on? So with a user filter, this sits on top of the data source itself. So I can vary the levels of access that people have to the data. For someone like myself, or the manager of this entire account, I want them to be able to see everything. But for an individual user, I want to limit them to just their own sub-account. And so I can create a filter on top of that. So now when an individual comes in and looks at this, they're only going to see the stuff that they've created and the resources that they're using. So by using that user filter, slightly more advanced feature there, I've really significantly broadened the range and the applicability of this dashboard here. So talking a little bit more about some of the directions that you can go with this type of data. Now, I just showed you the one dashboard. We're getting a ton of use out of that, but there's definitely more to be explored here. And these are some ideas that I've pulled from our internal team as well as from customers. So the first is, of course, identifying cost and usage spikes. That's the first one. We want to know what we're spending stuff on. And that one we can answer pretty straightforward here with the dashboard I showed you. Another great use case is tracking down rogue or unused instances and also switching over to reserved instances. So this is a use case I've heard a lot about. If you have something that you're using an on-demand EC2 instance, and you could be saving a ton of money by switching to reserved, visualizing this data can help you identify those. Also monitoring software and operating systems, so planning for end of life or upgrading, or if you're migrating to a different operating system, that data is also reflected in the cost and usage report. So you know the operating system of everything that you've deployed. Of course, planning for future scaling is huge, and this one we rely on pretty significantly internally at Tableau. So based off of what we spend this year, what can we anticipate spending next year, and how can we start budgeting for that? And then also which departments are using which services. So we have pretty rigid tagging practices for all of our AWS resources. So we can break this down by team and by usage. Is this a development environment, a production environment? And you can get very specific with the type of tagging that you have. And those tags are reflected in the cost and usage report as well. So we can start baking that into the reporting that we're doing. All right. So what is next? Quite a lot of things. First of all, this presentation and all of the materials are going to be available on our Tableau website. So I'm going to be writing up a blog post about this, sharing the dashboard with some additional dashboards that I've built as well, and the Lambda function as well. So that's all going to be available for people to use, take, modify, and make their own. And what I want to talk about is the idea of kind of abstracting this workflow. So this is a pretty specific sort of question that I set out to answer. I wanted to focus on cost and usage. But it just so happens when you use stuff on AWS, it's creating a ton of data. And there are a lot of different ways to pull that data out of AWS and start putting visualizations on top of it. So I've just showed you one example here, but you can do this with lots of other AWS features as well. So a great example of this is guard duty. So this is intelligent threat detection that is another service that Amazon has created. And what you can do is you can actually set up guard duty reports to be scheduled out to S3. You can build Lambda functions on top of those to clean, flatten those files. And you can do the same workflow using Athena or using a database of your choice to pull in that data, collect it, and then start building visualizations on top of it. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just those simple steps, setting up the reporting, building out the Lambda functions, and then storing that data somewhere. Now, my colleague presented on this yesterday, showed some visualizations that we've built on top of guard duty. So I definitely recommend you go check that one out. There should be a recording of it. And it's available on Tableau Public, which is a gallery of lots of visualizations people have created. And so I'm going to leave the last few minutes here for questions. But thank you all for listening and paying attention. And I challenge you to not only take a look at the resources that I'm providing here, but to investigate your own deployments, because it's pretty easy to start pulling that information and putting a visual layer on top of it. You're going to start to get a lot of value out of your AWS deployment. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hang out for questions.
Yeah, if anybody has a question, I can bring you the microphone so everybody can hear the question. Just raise your hand, anybody?
The feature for limiting users to see only part, their stuff, is that a function of permissions, or is that something you do with like customized parameters?
You can actually do both. So you can set up permissions on top of the data and the visualizations, and you can do it at the row level as well. So you could limit total access at a user level to the content and to specific pieces of the content. Yeah. So you can do both.
Anybody else? Questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Madeline.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for spending your time with us. That was our last one, so we hope you got a lot of great information, and we wish you safe travels home, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.